Time to filter in. We'll get started here. Meanwhile, I'll introduce you to my co-presenter, Stanley. Like I'm covering her face. She will be my in-person audience today. I don't know if any of you are watching this with doggies also, but I'm a big dog fan, so you know, drop the name of your pet if he's sitting right next to you. 5 dogs, that's the dream. Awesome. All right, well, 5:15, let's get going. I don't want to keep anyone here longer than they should. Thank you all for joining me. It is 5:15 in Baltimore, Maryland, which means it's happy hour. Unfortunately, I just have my water bottle here today, but I appreciate everybody coming to listen to my talk. This is my very first DrupalCon presentation experience. It's a little weird that it's online. I was very much looking forward to presenting in front of a live audience, and I was going to be such an interactive speaker. So this is going to be different, but I love this chat because I feel like it's going to be So today, as you saw on the session, we will be discussing the Gutenberg editor and the layout builder. I call this kind of all-encompassing the visual editing experience and how you can implement that into your website and how you can think about adding that as a feature into your website in general. So let's get going. All right. A little bit about me. So my name is Jenna Schenk. I am a front-end web developer at Unleashed Technologies. I have worked there for about the past 4 years. My first job out of college, so I've only been developing for about 4 years. I watched a presentation earlier today where someone had been writing code since I was basically daunting that I'm here among such amazing minds, but hopefully I'll have some information to bestow. So as I said, I'm a developer at Unleashed. We work in the web industry. I don't know if I have any fellow agency members out there, but we build and manage our clients' websites. So over the past 4 years, I have worked in almost every industry that you can think of, from small shops to large enterprise clients. This has been awesome for my coding abilities because I have encountered almost every kind of Drupal experience that you can give a content editor. So I have built from scratch about 12 Drupal 8 sites myself, and then I also get to maintain a number of different clients, 6, 7, 8 Drupal sites as well throughout my day. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, as I mentioned. My favorite coworker is my dog named Stanley. She is named after the 2018 Stanley Cup that the Caps won. Interesting enough, my first DrupalCon was in 2018 when I watched the very first game of the playoffs in Nashville, and they ended up winning that year, so I'm hoping the same juju is going here, where attending DrupalCon kind of gives the Caps some good luck. All right. I'm just checking this chat really quick. Saw something about slides. Yes, I will need to put a link to the slides up later. It looks like I didn't do that, so that's my bad, but I will definitely add that after this presentation. I apologize for that mistake. All right, jumping in. So here is an outline of what we will be discussing today. We are going to start with what is traditional site building. So what does that mean in the Drupal world? What is the developer versus the content editor's role? And the benefits and the limitations of site building. Then I'm going to dive into a couple of demos, one displaying the layout builder and one the Gutenberg editor, so we can see how they work within Drupal. And then we can figure out which tool is right for you. Then, since we're all developers here, we're going to dive into developing and extending. So what additional modules can you use with Layout Builder versus the Gutenberg editor, how can you do some customizations along the way, and then hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. All right. So first up, traditional site building. So everything I will be talking about today is a reflection of my approach to web development and site management. Your personal process may look a little bit different, but I'm willing to guess you will find some of the same similarities along the way. Before we jump into these new tools that I want to discuss, I want to frame our conversation with what is traditional site building and why you might be finding yourself wishing there was something a little bit different for your content managers. All right, so what is site building? I would define site building as the space between design and a usable product. It is typically performed by a developer. The developer is going to designate the fields, the layouts, the style, leaving the content entry to the placement of the content editor. So we call this site building because you are adding the fields, you're creating those widgets that your content editors are going to use. And it's not anything that the content editor actually has to work with. It's more they're just going to use the tool after you create it. It also builds the framework for a content manager. So once the site building is completed, it is passed off to the content manager to then use at their discretion. So you build a website, you build your fields, your blocks, your views, and then your content manager is the one that comes in and starts populating those About Us pages, maybe your product pages, things like that. And that really brings the site to life. A content manager is always a client, but in your role, maybe you are the content manager or a fellow coworker is a content manager if you're working in-house on a particular site. You kind of have to define those roles, but the way that I'll usually be talking today is as if the content manager is a client. Okay, so in this traditional site building role, the developer is the one who's creating the layouts made up of fields, blocks, and views. Then templates are defined by the code base to add additional styles, layouts. So this is where we're adding our grids, things like that. Fields are the things that populate the design that we originally received from that designer. The developer is creating the overall experience for the content editor. So this means that I'm deciding what kind of widgets they're using, what kind of help text and things like that they're going to be interacting with. The editor role basically means that they are using the content types and the fields that we've created, and they're crafting the content and they're strategizing how it's used. So think of sitemaps at this point, where different pages are going, what they're going to say, different things like that. So why we like this traditional site building process. Branding. So typically if you're working with an agency to build your site, or you have a developer that's building your site, you're going to have a huge emphasis on branding and design. You're not just going to have random colors over there. You want your site to have an overall feel. Site building allows for this. So I can define what colors go there, different things like that. It also gives you consistency. So I, as the content editor, I have an expectation of how things will look. If I put a title field in, it's going to be a certain size on the front end without any input from my part. I know that images are going to be cropped in a certain way. Teaser text is going to be clean and exactly how it's supposed to be looking. But it does come with limitations. So many of the reasons why we like traditional site building are also reasons why it can be bad. You are in fact restricted to those certain fields that the developer has created. This kind of can become a problem when you are creating a landing page and say you wanted a gallery, but your developer didn't build a gallery layout in your landing page. You can't customize text or things like that. You're kind of stuck with what your developer gave you. It can't handle unique content. So in a landing page in particular, this can be very frustrating. You want to build out a concept, but you don't have the ability to make these adjustments on the fly, you would have to then go back to your developer and say, hey, I have a new concept. Let's talk about designs and how long will it take to build. And that leads to the next point, which is you need technical expertise to make changes. So oftentimes when you do want adjustments to your layout, you will have to talk to your developer to build that for you. The content editor would not be able to do that themselves, which can be really frustrating to some people because it can affect timelines if they want something turned around quickly. All right, to recap the current site building process in Drupal as it is, pages contain fields. Fields are laid out in a template, and editors then input the design, input the content that's translated into the design, and there's one responsive design. So if you're looking at this image here, I've added pieces in Drupal fields, and it outputs like that with probably little influence from me, the content editor. So how do we improve this experience? How do we evolve the web experience? Why do we even want to evolve the web experience? It's a great question. Why does the editor experience matter? So if the end goal is to have a great website, I, the developer, am in control, and I will get us there, and the content editor should not worry about it. As a developer, I get this mindset, and I find myself there a lot. I forget about how the editor is going to interact with the content, and I just think about getting to the end goal. A little analogy, I love to hike. I like to hike by myself though, mostly because I like to go at my own pace, stop where I want to stop, go as fast as I want to go. When I hike with other people, I often find myself, turning around at some point and realizing my friend is way behind me struggling, or they stop to do something and I totally missed it. I think that really relates to the developer experience, where we can get tunnel vision and forget about the person that's kind of supposed to be walking beside us in this journey. So I quickly learned as a developer in site building that I can build beautiful, beautiful elements, but if my clients can't use them, then they're useless. If they're frustrated by them and they have to come to me for questions about how to work with the product, then I have failed as a developer. You should never expect your clients to be using HTML and CSS in a WYSIWYG. Say that again, you should never expect them to be using HTML and CSS in a WYSIWYG. It's just not, they're not developers, we shouldn't expect that of them. You need to be able to create content that they can visually work with, and that's at their level. So with these things in mind, Drupal has definitely tried to get to this point to be a little more visual in their editing experience. With Drupal 8, I believe it was the introduction of the block layout page, kind of in this more visual way where we have fun little regions and we can drop blocks. And the big thing to do was to build a whole bunch of custom block types and to tell our content editors to drop them onto these different regions, and it was going to be great. But I have found that my content editors never want to use this block layout page. It's intimidating. They often break things, and then they've got to emergency call their developer to quickly undo whatever config changes they just made. Then there's panels. I'm not going to lie, I have managed to avoid working with panels on most Drupal 8 sites. So I don't really have an opinion about it. I don't really know if it's as good or not. One was pretty complicated. And then there's paragraphs. Paragraphs, I love paragraphs. My faithful, faithful friend. I have so many paragraphs on each site. They are a site builder's dream. They're extremely flexible, extremely easy to build and drop in. However, they, from a pure editor perspective, they can get very messy and confusing. If you have 10 to 15 different paragraph types on a page, and then you start injecting them into columns, and it's just very, very complicated. My biggest complaint that I often hear from editors is that they look at Drupal and they're like, wow, they have this beautiful editing experience. Or they look at WordPress and they have this great editing experience. Why can't Drupal have this? And what does this complaint actually mean is that they want something that's more visual. They want to see what they're making as they're making it. So the Drupal community did listen, and I'm happy to see that we kind of dipped our toes into the visual editing experience. I will preface that this is pretty new to Drupal still, so a lot of these things are in active development, and you have to be comfortable with bugs and patient to bug fixes. But I mean, they've come in huge strides than when I gave this talk back in October for the first time. All right, so let's jump into our big fun modules. We have the layout builder and the Gutenberg editor. So an overview of what I'll be talking about in this next section. Layout builder is now in core. If you listen to the Dries notes, you will have heard him talk about this. It's going to be a big thing in Drupal 10, so I highly recommend that everyone work with it a little bit at least. Try to get comfortable because I think it's going to be unavoidable soon. Gutenberg editor is not in core. It's an alternative editing experience that kind of originated from WordPress and was brought over to Drupal into a Drupal module. So if you're playing along, you will just go into your Drupal site and enable Layout Builder in your core. But then if you want to add Gutenberg editor, you have to install, hopefully using Composer, this module. The nice thing about these modules is that you do not have to use them for every content type. And in fact, you could use both on the same site if you wanted to. I would not recommend that. That would be pretty weird. But if for some reason you wanted to, you could have both. I do like that you can enable it on a content type basis, because some content types, you just, like a basic page, you might not even care if they have a visual editing experience. Both of these editors seek to solve problems. So the number one thing is to empower the content manager. So in the first half of this presentation, we talked about that division between what the role the developer has and what the role the content manager has. These new editors seek to blur that line between these two roles so that the dev and the content manager can start to do some of the same things. You can build unique landing pages on the fly. I say landing pages, you could build unique content on the fly would probably be a better word. You no longer need to choose one layout, one design. You can instead choose an array of design components, which is probably a whole nother topic, and arrange those in any way you want and you see fit on the page. It marries branding and flexibility. So you can still have that polished look that everybody wants on their site, but you can still give flexibility to the content manager to design as they go on each page. And then finally, it's a more robust tool than the WYSIWYG. I think we've clung to the WYSIWYG for a long time, and we need to lay it to rest and start to rely on more components, because our content editors are just going to be able to use those much easier. All right, Layout Builder. So Layout Builder, you can create layouts. The emphasis is on layouts here. Now, the idea behind Layout Builder is it's going to replace that Manage Display tab in Drupal. So as a developer, you won't be going in and creating layouts that way. You will be using Layout Builder start to finish. Basically, it takes your current process where, as a developer, I'm going to define out fields in my content, and then it seeks to add a second piece to that page experience where, after I've added content to all those fields, I then can define a layout as a content editor. Or I can use the default layout that my developer has defined for me, but I'm not tied to one direction or the other. So, and what is important to note here is it does use the traditional Drupal field. So there is that part there. I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. You're not getting out of that portion as a site builder. The Gutenberg editor creates pages. The Gutenberg editor is best used as a tool when there's a page that doesn't need defined fields. So think landing pages, maybe basic pages where you don't really need that structured data like you would in other content types. It allows you to build the page as you go. The backend editor, you'll be adding content and setting the layout at the same time. So I'll be adding my hero banners, my titles, maybe a gallery, my text content, dropping in piece by piece as I go. There's no set fields that I need to fill out. So how do I know which tool is right to me? They both sound pretty similar. They both allow you to find different layouts. Well, I think first and foremost, and if you take one thing from this presentation, it would be this slide. I think this is the most important piece of building your content editor experience, is to ask these questions. So typically when I'm building a site, I want to get to know who's going to be working with it, how many people are going to be working with it, what is their technical abilities, and I will ask these kinds of questions. So what kind of content do I most frequently create or edit? This is important because you can have a site where it's a lot of product content, or a site where it's a lot of magazine content and they're making really rich articles. How often do I create and edit content? This is also really important. You would not want to add one of these editor tools to a website where they maybe only edit pages like once a year. It could be too overwhelming for them and too confusing, too big of a solution for what they actually need on their website. A great question is, what do I find most limiting during content creation? So is it the fields are too restricting, or are the layouts too restricting? I think that's a really important distinction. And then finally, do I like creating custom layouts? This can be a touchy question to ask a content editor, but are they actually good at it? So I have some content editors, they're graphic designers. They love building websites. They love getting in there and really crafting their content. And then I have some content editors where logging into Drupal is really stressful. That part is just stressful. And then working with their content is stressful, and they don't even want to do any of it. That's important to note here. Like, how can we streamline that process? So keep these questions in mind as we're looking at these tools, and don't just get excited about a tool and throw it on a website and then blame me for recommending terrible products or something. All right, let's dive into our first demo of the Layout Builder. While this is loading up, I'm just going to take you through an example of a case study, and it's a basic content type that I built on a very basic install of Drupal. So if it looks not pretty, it's because I didn't actually design anything. Don't blame me for that part. All right. Buffering. Here we go. So you notice off the bat that this looks exactly like Drupal that you know. It's got fields, we have body, testimonial, organization, and different fields like a location. I'm just going to save that content. It's going to spit out on the page in my very default layout that I've defined. Then I'm going to go to the Layout tab. You'll notice that now my fields have these fun little boxes around them. I can turn off the content preview if that's too confusing, but I like to see my content, so let's put that back on. You also notice there's a little message about you're editing for this particular node. So I'm only changing the layout for this one single node, not for all of them, which is really great for content editors so that they don't break your designs. All right, I'm adding a column here. I can change the width of these columns, and now I can add blocks into the columns. Or I can drag a block into that particular column. But first, let's edit this image field. I'm going to configure it. I'm going to hide the label. Let's change the formatter to be a thumbnail. Add a quick little image style in there because that image is huge and now much more usable. And I can drop it into that side block. Next, I want to take this text field, put it over there, looking at the rest of this content. Let me add a new field, and I can actually duplicate any of these other fields that are already on the page. You'll notice that we had the ability to add different blocks in here as well. I was just working with fields in this particular demo, but I added my location there. Everything else, I think I just leave it down here. You can move it up and down if you want. I'll put it below. And then save layout. And on this one particular node, now I have a completely custom layout that I visually saw while I was building it. Super easy. And all the Drupal fields in the back end are intact. Nothing has changed in that half. At the end of this, I added a little demo of if I was going to apply a layout for a 2-column defined library layout, which is a module I'll mention later. But you can give the content editor a few different layout options as well. That's a really cool module. All right, and that is the demo of Layout Builder. When to use. So I find Layout Builder most useful for field-intensive content. So a lot of times I'll work with websites where we are syncing product information from an external AMS or something like that. We're not having content editors going in and changing those fields, but perhaps there's a particular product page that they would like to make a little more interesting looking. Maybe it's their most popular product. Layout Builder comes really in handy because I can just add that right on top of my Drupal build and give them the ability to apply these really beautiful layouts. It's really great for one-off custom pages. So if you're building a basic page, but you want a really fun About Us page, this is where it comes in handy. I can change the layout without affecting all the other basic pages. Pros and cons. You can move otherwise static fields wherever you want. Add blocks, views, widgets, whatever section that you want. Con, there's no out-of-the-box elements. Now there's some great modules that you can add to get some of those elements, but when I first install Layout Builder, I'm working with anything that I've already built on the website. So there's still that piece of site building that a developer would have to do. Not really a bad thing, just something to keep in mind. Gutenberg editor. All right. So this originated from WordPress while our video is buffering up here. And Drupal kind of ported it over. It has a very WordPress feel, which I think for some people who are hesitant with Drupal, that making that switch, this is actually a really great compromise for them because it's something that they're familiar with. Let's remember that Gutenberg editor works best with undefined fields. So when you install the Gutenberg editor, I would not even recommend building fields out for this. All right, well, notice right off the bat, this doesn't even look like Drupal. It's a blank page. That's because there's no fields. The only thing that you're going to do is add a title, and then we're going to jump right into building out our page. So I've started here with building a little banner. This is all out of the box. I did not customize any of these pieces. This is just what comes with your Gutenberg install. As you can see, I'm just going down the page, quickly adding different elements. So I've added a column piece, and now I want to put an image in my column. I access my media library, select one of my beautifully curated images. Oh, I just saw this question. Do you define content types to use Gutenberg? Yes. So much like Layout Builder, I would just go to that edit page of a content type and check the box that says use Gutenberg editor, and then you'll see this editing page. It's super easy. I love this because I see exactly what I'm building. So example with this quote field, I can see where the citation needs to go and where the title field needs to go, even kind of how it's probably going to look. This gallery piece is super fun. I can select a bunch of images, and then I see exactly how it's going to lay out on the front end. I can, on the side, a lot of these widgets will have some additional settings, so I can change the column width. I can move around the images. All visually, I can remove an image completely, switch that column back to something bigger. Yeah, that's a great comparison. Layout Builder, better for front-end devs. As a front-end dev, I actually hate visually building layouts, but I think it will be really nice for someone who's new to Drupal. If that's like your first site building experience, it's a great way to learn. Okay, so we built our page, and that took me like a minute to build this like amazing landing page with all these cool pieces that were out of the box. If I go back to the edit page, I mean, besides the width, I would say, of your content, it looks exactly the same. The nice thing is you can add something like spacers, and oh, my dog woke up. Hi, girl. And you can move your content around instead of just pushing, adding a bunch of empty paragraphs into the body fields. You can add these spacers, move them up and down. So the content editor can literally be in control of that spacing as well, which is super nice. Yeah, so like I said, great for quick and dirty pages, no structure. I'm going to talk about how this kind of looks in the back end a little bit later in the presentation. All right, and that is the Gutenberg editor demo. Oops, that's what I wanted. So when to use this? I would say the sites that are content driven, which seems like a weird thing because all site has content, but I use this phrase for more when you're thinking about maybe news sites, so like a magazine site, or sites that have tons of landing pages, so more of a brochure site, where that content editor wants to be building every single page very thoughtfully and very customizable, where defining fields for them would really not be useful other than a million different paragraph content types or something like that. Gutenberg editor needs a content savvy editor. Is that true? I think not. I think that you have to be less savvy with the Gutenberg editor because it's so visual. It's very much like Squarespace and things like that. It's pretty easy to mess around with. Okay, so again, I said it has a lot of out-of-the-box features. So these are all the features that come with Gutenberg editor on the install. You can also pull down additional features from the Gutenberg cloud. I think that was what it's called. Yeah. To build out your Gutenberg editor more, but it has all these elements already. Also, reusable blocks are good here. So this is where Drupal kind of intersects a little bit more. So if I had like a contact us block, I can use that within here really well, and I can drop those blocks in as I go along, which is super nice integration with Drupal there. And I can place those blocks on a page-by-page basis. So again, it solves that fear of using the block layout page and having to define where it shows up and things like that. I'm going to answer this one. How portable are blocks between WordPress and Drupal? They are the exact same code, which is crazy to me. But if I copied something out of Drupal, I could drop it right in a WordPress site. It would work exactly the same. So pros and cons. I love that it has so many out-of-the-box elements. I think if you have to get a website up fast and cheap, this is awesome. Easy to see exactly what you're building. I have some content editors that love this feature. The cons is it's difficult to alter these core elements in the back end. You have to know something about React in order to start to extend these things and build your own module, which for some strictly site builders could be a big lift. But if you're a front-end developer, that should be something that you'd be learning a little more. It's a pretty relevant language. Developing and extending. Okay, because we're all Drupal developers here. This is, you know, the most interesting part of the talk, probably. Let's look under the hood and see what we're dealing with. Notable technical features about Layout Builder. Defined layouts are exportable. So if I, the developer, am making a default layout, I can export that. However, anytime that I override, like I did in that demo, that is not exportable, which is good, I actually think, because I kind of hate when I have to go to a production site to deploy code and then I have to commit all the configuration changes that my content manager made. Super annoying and easy to mess up. This way, we're not interacting with each other's code. It replaces the Manage Display tab. I mentioned this earlier. Layout Builder gets away from that way of defining layouts and it moves it to that visual defining layouts. Add-on modules. They do have some great add-on modules that I was kind of reading about this past week that have really built out the Layout Builder library to make it more comparable with the Gutenberg editor. Layout Builder Kit, I think this is a lot of active development going on here, but a lot of pre-made components, so you have your tabs, accordions, galleries, and things like that would come from this module. And then you have the Bootstrap Layout Builder, which is based off the Bootstrap theme, and it gives you a lot of those elements. I often use Bootstrap when I'm theming a front-end site, so I love the idea of this module, and it gives you those nice responsive grids that you might not have otherwise. Best module award for the Layout Builder goes to Layout Library. You can create reusable layouts for your pages. So, for example, if I had a case study, I could give that content editor the ability to have the simple one column, or maybe I've defined a 2-column layout as well. Quickly applying those new layouts without any additional effort on the content editor's part if they're wary of that layout page. Okay, the Gutenberg editor under the hood. It is built with React.js, which I think is super cool and super forward-thinking. It has a WordPress origin though, so if you were to look at the source of any of these pages, you would see code like this that I have on the side of my screen here. WordPress is prefixing all these things. Like I was mentioning earlier, I could literally cut many of these pieces that were out of the box and drop them in a WordPress site and it would work. There is no configuration export ability. So when I'm creating these pages on the fly, it's all in the database, which you could copy and paste the source and just drop it in your production site if that's your workflow, if you have a staging to production. But just remember, if an editor is making changes, there's not going to be any configuration that they can look back at and maybe undo. You could look at the revision tab, but now, when it comes to creating Gutenberg editor blocks, that can get tricky because it is in React versus your traditional Drupal pieces, or it's more PHP and Twig based. But Create Cloud Block is an awesome tool where it basically works much like the, what's it called? The Drupal. It's how you would create models with Drupal. I'm totally blanking on what that's called. And you just do a quick npm install console, Drupal console. Thank you. It's much like the Drupal console where it gives you that framework for your module, and then you just have to add different features that you want, and then you have a new Gutenberg block that you can then export. You submit to the Gutenberg cloud and then pull down to your site. So other people can use your cool block if you publicly push it. And that's how you would be extending that stuff. So Gutenberg editor, a little bit trickier to make custom elements, but not impossible. So let's review what we talked about. Traditional site building is limiting, even though it's safe, and I know exactly, I'm the developer, am totally in control. The Gutenberg editor and Layout Builder are powerful site building tools, and they give a lot of power to your content manager, which I think for a lot of my clients, that's exactly what they've been waiting for all along. You can use one or both on your site. You define them per content type. So any content type that I've created, I just go into that edit piece, like where you would be defining information about if you're showing like the title or the content authoring piece, you know, that page. You just check off if you want to use the Gutenberg editor there, and then the layout builder is in that display tab. You check off use layout builder. And that's a wrap. So I don't know if you guys have questions for Stanley and I. She's passed out again, so she won't answer your questions, but I will try my best to. Oh, you guys can see my notes. Let's try and move that out of the way. All right, I think we have 5 minutes left. So somebody gave me a quick tip to preface it with a cue if you have a question you want me to see. Accessibility. That's a great question. I saw that early in the chat. I don't know how accessible actually these are. That's a shortcoming on my part. I'm not sure. Can Gutenberg and Layout Builder be used on the same node? No. They would conflict with each other. Mobile layout alterations. So I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Layout Builder is not the grid, like the column element is not responsive, but if you use those additional modules, it will make your grid responsive. What kind of dog is Stanley? She's an Australian cattle dog. She was a rescue. She's from Mississippi, if you have any Mississippi people here. You can define fields in Gutenberg. I did learn that actually recently. I'm not sure how that totally looks on the editing experience. I have to say I didn't try it that way. Let's see, what else? Oh, you have an Australian cattle dog too. They're awesome. You deploy page basis, same layout, but different content. Node clone module. Ooh, I have never used the node clone module, so I actually don't know how they would interact with these modules. That's a really great question, though. I probably wouldn't look at it that way. If I felt like there was a layout that I wanted to duplicate multiple times, I would define that layout with layout libraries. If I thought my content editor was going to want to do that, maybe I would teach them how to do that as well. Can you use paragraphs in Gutenberg? Yes, I think so, because I think you can use fields. So I don't know how good it looks, and I think it would be super confusing, but I'm pretty sure I've read that you can use paragraphs. There's like this bug flying around. I think the editing experience would be a little bit wonky. If I was building a site, I would probably take those paragraphs and translate them into a Gutenberg block. I think that's more like the direction. Ooh, I didn't scroll down my chat here. That was bad. Questions. Assuming you can restrict roles, who can use either editor based on role? Yes. So probably what we're talking about here is, can you prevent maybe have a super content editor versus a basic content editor from changing layouts? That's a good question. I'm actually not totally sure. How well do modules index pages built with Gutenberg? That's another question that I'm not totally sure the answer to about indexing. I think that it kind of just dumps it into a big body field is what I understand. And so you would have to kind of search. The way that Drupal interprets that field is one big lump. And so searching, you're not going to have that structure. So that's kind of a negative. It's more of like a basic keyword search. My old coworker CJ just asked if I sang karaoke at DrupalCon Nashville. Obviously, when you're in Nashville, you have to sing Taylor Swift because, I mean, why not? Yeah, that was a great time. I loved that DrupalCon. What about create inline? Ooh, it's going so fast. Creates inline. Doesn't show, and this is bad for content creators. Okay, so the question I believe is Layout Builder creates creates layouts that you can't see on the editing page. Yeah, that could definitely, I could see that as being an issue for content creators if I'm not aware of a certain layout and then I maybe change the image and it totally breaks my layout. So I would factor that in determining into training to know that those things could affect the layout on the other end, and maybe also take into consideration how many content editors are there. Is there one for the site or are there 50? How's revisioning handled with Layout Builder and Gutenberg editor? Revisioning seems pretty good in Layout Builder. You can roll back to different layouts that you've already kind of built. Gutenberg editor has the same, because it drops it into a big body field kind of thing. It's able to revision that code pretty well. You could create a node in Layout Builder. Would it affect your perception of the utility of Layout Builder? I don't think I totally understand that question, to be honest. All right, at 6:01, I don't want to hold everyone hostage. Obviously, feel free to, I think there's like DM in this. I'm not sure. You can find me in the People tab if you have further questions. I will put the slides online because I messed that up. Thank you for calling me out on that. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their conference. Bye, guys. Ooh, I stopped the session.